Hi, this is Scott Bradfield talking to you from the bathtub, not the literal bathtub, but the metaphorical bathtub of our imaginations. And I'm going to do two or three. I'm kind of backed up because I've been doing a lot of bathing lately, and I've got a few things I want to do. So I'm going to do a few lectures this afternoon. So if I'm wearing the same shirt, I always think people think that guy he doesn't change his shirt all week. I do change my shirt quite frequently, but I'm going to be wearing the same shirt for a while. Um, I've told you the production values in this series is just total crap. We have terrible the production people. I've sacked all of them, by the way. I mean, and today I came from the gym, so I'm wearing my gym trunks, and I was realizing I was going to change. I thought, well, I don't really need to put pants on. I guess I wonder if this is what Tom Brokaw does, and like if those guys sit there without any pants on. So I've got my shirt on, and it's a little funny just because it's not tucked into your pants. It really does hang funny if you don't tuck your shirt in. I said at the beginning, this is the shameless self-promotion episode of the bathtub, and it comes at a time in my life when I've probably broken every vow I ever made about anything in terms of my career, which has not helped my career or hindered my career. It seems to go the exact same direction. But I was thinking of all the things I sort of said I would never do in my life, and I go back. I mean, there's just so many of them. I remember going back decades ago. I said I would never buy an answering machine. I don't know why. I thought that was really wrong. And of course, eventually, after everybody else got one, and I had no friends because whoever called me, I didn't know about it. I eventually got an answering machine, and I checked it constantly, just constantly. And I wasn't going to get a computer, and I got a computer. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, by the way, when I was a writer. My first Amstrad computer in London was just so great for my way of writing and assembling bits of ideas here and there. And I love the computer. And what else did I say I wasn't going to do? I was never going to get a smartphone. And I have to say I had a smartphone for a long time, and I did finally get rid of it. We don't need smartphones. We don't need them. I've decided this. I've tried to tell my students. They don't believe me. So getting rid of my smartphone, the best thing I ever did. And in my career, I think I said this before because I've done the shameless self-promotion once before about the Bob Johnson book, which I just finished on Facebook, and which I'm putting together for a book sent around. And I always felt it was kind of tacky for writers to talk about themselves. Whenever I heard a writer talk about themselves and their work, they just sounded like assholes. Even writers I really liked, they just almost always sounded like idiots. And the people who I mean, most of the writers I liked were either very good and kind of unassuming about speaking about their books, which is hard to do. There were a few, but it was still not interesting. It was much more interesting just to read the book than to listen to the author talk about it. The writers who loved to talk about their writing were people like Norman Mailer, who is still right there he's right there in the high watermark of bad writers to me who talked about themselves all the time. He was constantly talking about his work, and he was such a bad writer. I hate Norman Mailer's books. We were never reading Norman Mailer in the bathtub, by the way. And I'm sorry if I say something bad about him since he's dead, but he was probably a great guy, but I hate his books. So people who talk about the books always bother me, so I kind of broke the rule of Bob Johnson. But now that I'm getting old and I know I'm going to die, and my career is just basically, just exactly where it was when I started, like 30, 40 years ago. I figured, what the hell? We're talking about books I'm reading in the bathtub. And to be totally honest, all this past couple of weeks, I've been reading myself in the bathtub. And I have to say, I really enjoy reading myself in the bathtub. And I'll tell you why. This is called Greetings from Earth. I've been writing short stories all my life. I just finished one today I'm really happy with. And this is a book of stories that was published in 1993 in England, and a couple years later as a paperback original in America. It's a book I'm extremely proud of. I think it's a great book. It did pretty well in England. It got some attention. I think it came out in America and didn't do that good. None of my books sell, but anyway, this is a book I love. I've got a couple other books of stories since then. But what I've been doing in the past 6 years, 5 years ago, I started trying to transfer all my books that are out of print. Rather than just go around begging at these publishers' houses, I just decided I was going to put them all into e-format, which was a huge pain in the ass, by the way, because I didn't have any of these old books on on a valid computer disk, because a lot of them were written on old Amstrad, my old Amstrad computer in England. So I had to scan them. I had to learn how to scan them. I think I actually typed the history of luminous motion onto a Word document. And I went through the onerous and exhausting process of turning these old books into Kindle, Amazon Kindle. Again, I know we should not use Facebook and we should not use Amazon. I totally agree, but I don't know. That's the only place I can publish my books. So I published these books on Amazon. They sell like 2 copies of. They all collectively sell maybe 5 copies a month or 10 copies a month if it's a whirlwind month. But they're available. That's all I ever wanted, was these old books that I love to be available. But the hardest one to do was Greetings from Earth, because by the time I got to it, I was so tired of doing the whole scanning, and then you have to go, once it's scanned, you have to go through and correct everything. Then you have to put it into the format that's appropriate for Amazon, and it's really, really boring. The only good part of writing, I've always thought, or the best part of writing was not publishing books. The best part has always been for me is getting the bound galleys. I don't know if I have the bound galleys of anything here, but the bound galley was always the most exciting part for me as a writer, because I actually saw it as a book. I could read it to do the final tiny, just the small changes, the correct typos, small stylistic changes. If you saw something really glaring that you had to fix, you could fix it. And you usually had a good editorial, a good copy editor to help. And cleaning the text up was really fun. I've always enjoyed that part. It was also the part where it felt like a book and I could read it with the pleasure of a reader. Because I actually read all my books with that pleasure. I'm sorry to say that. And so Greetings from Earth, for the past few weeks, I've been reading this finally in this final form. You can take the galley and put it on a Kindle. So I've been sitting in the bathtub every morning rereading all my old stories from 20, 30 years ago. And I have to say I love all of them very much. And it's going to come out next week, 1st of March. I made it on Kindle. It's got a great cover. My son put together these great covers years ago. It took years for me to get off my ass and finish this. Here's a picture of me when this book came out in 1993. I swear to God, I don't know who that is. That's a fake mustache, by the way. I was wearing a fake mustache there. I don't know if I'll read anything. I guess I'll read you 2 or 3 sections from a couple of the stories, and then I'm going to have a little proposal. There's a story here called The Darling. It's probably if any of my stories are known at all, The Darling is slightly known because it's been in a couple of anthologies. And the story starts like this. Afterward, Dolores Starr would lie on her bed with a sort of stunned and implicate amazement at the power of things, the power of that vast, soft universe of force contracting gently around her body like a hand. Dolores, she thought. Dolores Starr. She didn't feel hurt so much as bewildered and tired, as if she'd awoken from a mere dream of struggle in some other distant room filled with ballooning silence and white, intricate spaces. Usually by now Dad had returned to the kitchen to drink, but sometimes he took his gun from the clothes closet and waved it around for a while. Maybe we both learned a little lesson today, didn't we, Miss Teen Princess, Little Miss Queen of the World? Dad aimed his Walter P38 at vanity mirror, cheesecloth curtains, Dolores' desktop crucifix. Kerpow, Dad said. Kerpow, pow, pow. That's the only lesson most people ever learn, Miss Beautiful, Miss All the Boys Lover. A bullet in the old brain pan, a crack on the head with a flat rock. Pow, bang. That's just about the only lasting truth this goddamn world's got to offer. Dad's gun was very heavy and very solid, and filled the entire apartment with its weight and stress. Dolores liked to hold the gun in her hands too. The entire universe of force seemed to withdraw a little when Dolores took it from the closet. She felt as if she had more air to breathe. Most of all, though, she liked the sudden sound of it, and the way Dad looked at her, as if she were someone strange and wholly unfamiliar. Then, very slowly, Dad lowered his head onto the kitchen table as Dolores moved his Jim Beam to one side. Dad's brains and blood virtually ruined the checkered tablecloth Dolores had bought at Kmart just that summer, And upstairs, Mrs. Morris struck the ceiling 3 times with her burnished mahogany cane. Mrs. Morris was 87 years old and lived alone. Mrs. Morris lived on a pension and had bad knees. Mrs. Morris had raised 4 children of her own and often said she deserved a decent night's sleep every once in a blue moon. That story, you might guess, it was. I write for these ebooks on Amazon. I do a little afterword to each of the books. That's another thing I said I would never do. All my life, I said I hate reading people's reflections on why they wrote books, but I felt I had to do it to make these new editions something different. So I wrote a little short piece at the end about where some of these stories came from. That story started out as I was teaching one of my first decent classes to teach as I was assisting in a course at UC Irvine, teaching one of my favorite books, Lolita, and Dolores, of course. It's Dolores Hayes. I changed it to Dolores Starr. And I'd always loved this book and really thought of it as just kind of this singing, magical book. And a lot of the girls in there were really upset by it. And I went home and tried to tell the story from Lolita's point of view, basically. And it's a story I quite like. There's a lot of stories in this book I love. I think I love them all. I have to say I immensely enjoyed reading myself in the bathtub the last couple of weeks. And there's so many of these stories I like for different reasons. I was thinking I might read something, just a little bit of one. I have Diary of a Forgotten Transcendentalist. It's about the Transcendentalists who, you know, Emerson, you know, Thoreau. This is the loser Transcendentalist. I love that story. Nobody's read it. I'm the only person who's read that story, by the way. There's a very, very short story I like in here. You can see this is more. The other thing about these talks is the scripts suck. This is really the worst organized class. Oh, here it is. 102. This is a story called In the Time of the Great Dying. And I'm just going to read the opening paragraph. It's a very short story. It was my first. One of the other things I said I would never do is I was never going to write autobiographical fiction. I hate people who tell their own stories or autobiographical essays. And I've done that too now. But this is a slightly exaggerated story about a part of my life. The story is called In the Time of the Great Dying. When I was 15 and my brother 11, our mother began undergoing a series of surgeries and treatments that left her bedridden for weeks and months at a time. At first, they removed a portion of her left foot and then her entire left breast. They removed her cervix, womb, and fallopian tubes. When I received my trainee driver's license at 15 and a half, I regularly drove our mother to radiation treatments at Children's Hospital in San Francisco, where I sat in the lobby and waited patiently among assortments of other radiotherapy patients, hurrying nurses and vague, irreproachable doctors. Like our mother, the other patients arrived wearing pajamas, housecoats, and slippers. They displayed reddening tumors on their throats and faces. Sometimes they were missing teeth, ears, eyebrows, limbs, and noses. They seemed slightly stunned and nondescript, as if they had either forgotten everything they had ever known, or were suddenly remembering everything they could never forget. So I got something from my mouth. It's another thing. I always look at some of these old videos. I got stuff sticking all over my face, or my nose is super red, or something weird. Anyway, that's a story based on it. It was a very short story, which really kind of moved me reading it again. I wanted to read a little bit more, but I won't. I'm running out of time. The last story is called The Parakeet and the Cat. I'm really proud of that story because it was kind of moving into the fables, animal fables, which is probably one of the things I enjoy doing the most. And The Parakeet and the Cat is based on a time in my life when I lived here in San Luis Obispo, where I am now. And there was 2 girls who lived next door. They had a parakeet, and they were showing it to me. And it got out and flew out the window. I spent my whole life thinking of this poor parakeet flying around, not trying to find how to get back to Australia. And this is where the stories just sort of just waited in my head till I wrote it. So that's it. Greetings from Earth will be available on Amazon. Is an ebook on the 1st of March with a beautiful cover. That's the best part. My son's cover is great. I got a new afterword at the end. There's probably typos, but I worked pretty hard to fix the typos. I'm going to put a link to it on the bottom of this, and warn people off that I'm not talking about any famous writers this episode. The last thing I was going to say was There's two things I had ideas since this is kind of personal. One, I was thinking of starting an international bathing club because there's Andy out in Northern Ireland, and there's a few people in England. I can't always distinguish who's where unless they actually mention on their notes at the bottom of the lectures. But if you're in a country other than America, or even if you're in a particular state, Tennessee or Arkansas or something, and you make a comment, tell us where you are. I'm just kind of interested. We'll have a lot of international bathing club, and we'll try to eventually, in 100 years, which is when I'm planning to, slowly retire, then we can try to get the whole world in the bathtub of books. So that'll be just for fun. And the second thing is, here's just shameless self-promotion. I just thought of this while we were doing this, so let me work it out. I'm going to make a deal. I have boxes of all my old first editions. I swear to God, I bought these years ago, thinking I was going to be famous. I was going to sell these things for a fortune. No one's ever bought any of them. No one wants them. They're sitting in the garage. I don't know what the hell to do with them. So I've got a plan. This is a kind of cool book. It's actually a beautiful, cheaply made book from Picador, the Picador first edition. There's very few copies of it around, and most of the books that exist are in my basement. So here's the plan. If you go to Amazon and buy the book and read it next week and make a comment, you can even make a bad comment. Let's be fair. Just make a comment on the page where they go stars, where you do the ratings, and do a rating to this book. And then let me know where to send it. You can just send me a note here at the bathtub or at the bottom of this video. Send me a note. I'll sign it and send it to you free, because no one was going to buy the damn thing. So I'll send it to you free in the U.S. I can't send it. Sorry, I can't send it to Northern Ireland. I don't have $25. I'm not even working these days. So, but I will send it to you in the States for $3 or $4. I can cover that. So the first 5 people who rate the book on Amazon and then tell me they did, I'll send you this book. Okay. So I'm going to do a couple more of these in the next hour or two. I'm not drinking. It's too early. I'm drinking my Pellegrino flavorless flavor substitute water, and I hope you do read. I love this book. I love short stories. I love writing short stories. I'm proud of those. So if you're interested in finding out what that crazy guy who talks about books actually writes, it's really cheap. It's $3.99, and I always put it on the promotions, so it's often 99 cents. So do please give it a try, and I'll now promise not to talk about myself for a while. Okay. Happy bathing.